Alright guys, today you're going to be installing the circuit breakers in your trainers. So I need to give you a little bit of instruction on how to do that. I've pulled back all the wire just to make it a little bit neater. Okay, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the breaker panel anatomy itself before we get too far down the road. In normal application, new construction, there's going to be two hot wires coming in either through the bottom of the panel or through the top of the panel. And those are going to be about the size of your thumb or your index finger. Two hot leads. All right. Then there'll also be a neutral lead and then a ground wire. And that ground wire is probably a 8-gauge wire that goes to a ground rod that's 6 feet long driven into the ground. The ground wire connects to what we call the ground bus right here. That's along the side of this. You can see right here there's a green screw and a short piece of ground wire tied from the ground bus to the back of the panel. And that's how you know that that's the ground bus. The neutral bus, where all the white wires will connect, is on this side of the breaker panel. And then there'll be two columns of breakers down the middle. So the two hot wires will tie into the main leads. You can see these two screws. Those screws are called lugs. And those two main wires would tie in right there. The ground wire would tie in underneath this lug. The neutral wire coming into the house would tie underneath that lug. The bus bars themselves receive each wire independent of each screw. So there's enough room in this panel for like 40 breakers. So each screw in the neutral bus and the ground bus corresponds to a single circuit. So let's talk about the circuit breakers themselves. Circuit breakers come in a variety of shapes and sizes. They're very dependent on the breaker panel itself because the anatomy of the breaker panel connects directly with the breaker panel. They're not universal. Different series of breaker panels have different types of connections for the backside of the circuit breaker itself. So this is a single pole, single circuit, 20 amp breaker. And you can see that 20 right there on the switch. This is a single pole, single circuit, and that's a 15 amp circuit. Each of these would represent maybe a circuit in your bedroom, somewhere in your house. Typically, the size or the amperage of the breaker itself is dependent on the wire of the circuit that you ran. So let's say the interior lights of your trainer is a 15 amp circuit because we ran 14 gauge wire. If we had run 12 gauge wire, then we would want to use a 20 amp circuit breaker. So the amperage is very much dependent on the gauge of the wire that's in the circuit. Okay? And then we have, for the dryer plug, we're going to put a 30 amp duplex or dual gang or double gang circuit breaker on the panel. And because of the length of the dryer wire, we're going to put this breaker down low on the panel. And as you can see, because it's duplex, it connects to two of these copper leads on the bus for the positive or the hot wires. So as I told you before, we've got 240 volts coming into the home or into the trainer. Those two wires tie onto these two screws. And then each of our circuit breakers will be in two columns. So these breakers clip onto the back and snap onto the panel, like so. So your team today will need, each team member will need to wire at least one circuit breaker. We've got 6 circuits in the trainer, plus the master breaker cutoff switch. So there's going to be a total of 7 breakers in your breaker panel.